Everybody, welcome to Studio 66. I'm Marcus Grant along with Alex Gelhar and Matt Franciscovich, a.k.a. The Franchise, all from the NFL Fantasy Crew. And we're here answering your Twitter questions on YouTube. You can always hit us up on Twitter at NFL Fantasy, but we have some of your questions here. We'll be doing this occasionally throughout the season, so keep an eye out for those as the season goes along. But let's start with a question from the Bald Eagle. Best pickup to replace Jordy Nelson. Alex, since you are our resident Packer fan, we'll start with you on this one.
Yeah, I mean, the obvious answer is Davante Adams, but because his offseason hype train was built up so much, he was the MVP of practices, and Aaron Rodgers was tooting his horn in the media, he's probably already been taken in your league. So if you're going to look for somebody else that's on the waiver wire, you got to go for either Ty Montgomery or Jeff Janis. And I think the leader in the clubhouse right now is Ty Montgomery. We saw our good colleagues at Around the NFL wrote up a post that he was starting as that third wide receiver, which the Packers run a lot of three wide receiver sets. Randall Cobb will go into the slot, and then Ty Montgomery, the rookie out of Stanford, is probably the guy to get. However, Jeff Janis could also see a lot of love. So it's worth it, just picking up one of these pass catchers and getting in on one of the most prolific passing offenses in the NFL.
Yeah, Jeff Janis has been a preseason darling. I'll say this, if you're going off the board away from the Packers, maybe you go with a Dorial Green-Beckham, who will be there late in your drafts, possibly on the waiver wire. Robin Yoon on Twitter at RobinEHYoon asks, and this one's for you, Franchise, LeSean McCoy, Mark Ingram in a standard league. I
got to go with Mark Ingram in this case. LeSean McCoy right now is out with a hamstring injury. That's a major concern for me. Mark Ingram is having a great preseason. Last year in just 13 games, he had 964 rush yards and 9 touchdowns. He's having a great preseason, and he's looking to become more of a three-down back. So if he can get those receptions in, he can up his production this year and be a more productive back than LeSean McCoy.
Yeah, and I like LeSean McCoy. I worry about that Buffalo Bills offensive line. He's going to get all of the opportunities back there, but if you can't find any holes to run through, it's going to be
carries
a problem.
On everything, man.
Absolutely. So, pre-college Doug at Gambino Dominic asks us to pick two from this group of wide receivers: Sammy Watkins, Brandon Cooks, Davante Adams, Brandon Marshall, and Devin Funchess. What say you, Alex?
Well, I say that's a pretty talented bunch of wide receivers, but if I'm only allowed to pick two of them, I'm going to go with Brandon Cooks and Davante Adams. Watkins is great. It was mentioned there's concerns on that offensive line on Buffalo. His quarterback decision is up in the air, so we don't know who's going to even be throwing him the ball. Brandon Marshall is great still, but he doesn't have the upside to me of Cooks or Adams. Cooks is that number one guy. He's shifty. He's going to get a lot of targets. Adams now is going to eat a lot of the 151 targets that went to Jordy Nelson last year. He's not going to get all of them, but he's been hyped a lot in the offseason. I think when number 12 is your quarterback, you got to go with his pass catcher in this decision.
Yeah, absolutely. Devin Funchess, another guy who's on there, but just so much of a project there in Carolina. I don't know if you can take a chance on him. Back to you, Franchise. Albert Racinos at the Trebla asks, C.J. Anderson or Matt Forte? This one's tough for me.
This is a tough one for me, too. I really like C.J. Anderson. He was so productive at the end of last season, but I got to go with Matt Forte. He's a more proven back. We don't know if C.J. Anderson can hold up for an entire season, and there's just more going on in that backfield, and Matt Forte is a clear-cut lead back. If I got to pick, I'm going with Forte.
Especially in round one, you want the safer option. Fantasy leagues aren't won in round one per se, but they can be lost if you pick the guy that doesn't have that safe floor.
Absolutely. Which brings us to actually our last question here. ATL Falcons at Unknown Tweeter asks, what's the best strategy for early rounds in 10-team standard scoring leagues for this season? Just one or two things. Alex, start with you.
I think if you can, get one of those top running backs that we talk about. Get your Eddie Lacy, your Adrian Peterson, your Le'Veon Bell. If those guys are gone, don't be afraid. Like we're talking about that high floor, get one of the top wide receivers and then take some shots on some upside running backs later, like an Amir Abdullah or a Chris Ivory or a Frank Gore in those middle rounds.
Yeah, Franchise, your thoughts?
Got to load up on running backs in the early rounds in a standard league. I also like to get a little saucy and maybe get one of those top quarterbacks. They can make a big difference. Aaron Rodgers, Andrew Luck, they can make a big difference in a standard
James Coe's been rubbing off on
the how do you know Michael Fabiano's not in the room? We talk about quarterbacks in the early rounds. I would say, look, go out in the first round and make sure you get a guy you feel confident in, no matter what the position is, somebody you know is going to produce for you week in and week out. The other thing is, if there's somebody you're targeting, don't be afraid to reach a little bit early for him. Go get your guy. Don't let ADP limit you as to what you can do or who you can get. Just be confident in who you are taking. So that'll do it for us. Thanks again for all your Twitter questions. You can always find us on Twitter at NFL Fantasy. We'll be here all season long. In the meantime, happy drafting, everybody.